Check, check. This is Brian, and I am just making sure that our audio is working correctly and that the stream is online. Last mic check. Thank you very much.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Very happy to have you here again, in spite of the weather. My name is Donatella Della Ratta. I'm part of the Communications and Media Studies department here at John Cabot University. And this is I don't know how many editions we have been running, but since 2019, we have been running this Digital Delights and Disturbances lecture series, which provides with different perspectives on the domain of the digital and the networked. And today we are having the second talk for the fall 23 edition. We are very proud today to have with us Dr. Milagros Micheli, who is an affiliate researcher at Weizenbaum Institute in Germany, sorry for my German, and their institute, which is the Distributed AI Institute founded by Dr. Timnit Gebru. Many of you might be familiar with the work of Dr. Timnit Gebru, who used to be involved with Google. And actually, she was part of the ethical AI group, and she left, or she was gently pushed by Google to leave the company because of the different position that she manifested vis-a-vis this idea of having an ethical AI, which is exactly the topic that we're going to discuss today with the help of Milagros Micheli. She did an amazing PhD work. I would like to encourage you to Google her name and find her work online. So today, Milagros Micheli is going to talk about, the title is actually pretty good. There's no ethical AI without ethical data work. I'm sure you have heard like this kind of buzzword everywhere, ethical AI. A lot of people in research groups and mainstream media, they talk a lot about how to make an AI ethical. But I think Milagros is going to argue that there's no possibility whatsoever to have an ethical AI if you don't look at the infrastructure which is underneath the AI, namely the dataset and the ways in which the dataset is built. But so, without further hesitation, I leave the floor to Milagros Micheli. We have an online stream, and so we welcome also questions from the tube. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Donatella, for inviting me, and to all of you for having me. It is really a pleasure and an honor to be here holding this talk that I succinctly called "There is no ethical AI without data work." It could have also been something like "There is no AI without data work, period." But since the topic tonight is also artificial intelligence and ethics, what happened? Okay. It's good? Okay. So enough, I would say enough about the title, let's start. So many of you have probably seen this or know this story. It made the cover of the Time earlier this year during the spring. So what happened is that to make ChatGPT, probably you all know ChatGPT, less toxic, OpenAI, that is the company that is that created, developed, markets ChatGPT, OpenAI had workers manually classifying text snippets, that is separating those text snippets that were acceptable to be used as training data from those that were not acceptable, from those that were considered biased or toxic. And this included, first of all, it meant that these workers were manually doing that work, and they were manually, they were confronted themselves with the type of material that you see here on screen, being, abuse, child abuse, murder, suicide, torture, and any kind of ugly things that one can find online. And again, I repeat, this was done by actual workers. How was this done? OpenAI outsourced the task because when it's done at scale, generally is outsourced. It outsourced the task through a subcontracted company called Zama that employs workers in Kenya. Many of those workers were from Kenya, but also many others were migrants and refugees from other African countries. OpenAI, or Zama in this case, the third-party company, had these workers working under terrible under terrible labor conditions, paid them less than $2 an hour, and after having them, or after being exposed to this highly disturbing material, neither Zama nor OpenAI offered these workers any type of psychological support. I work directly with a group of these workers who trained ChatGPT or who did this work, and many of them report being psychologically ill. Many of them say, I cannot work anymore, I cannot get a job, I'm depressed. One of them even told us, I've lost my family because of this, because of the PTSD, because of the nightmares, because of the mood swings, and so on. So these workers didn't get any type of support. Many of them are struggling. Many of them are demanding some sort of support. Many of them demand support to go back home, but they don't get it. They don't get it from OpenAI. They don't get it from Zama. Now, why am I showing this example? What do I mean by this example? There are actually two reasons why. The first, and those two reasons are actually more or less the core of what I'm trying to convey with this talk. So the first reason is because this is a textbook example of how data work is structured in many other cases and in many other AI products. Data work is a term that Julian Posada and I have coined to name what others have called micro work, crowdsourcing, ghost work. That is the labor that goes into producing data that fuels AI systems, the data that without which any AI system can function or can be developed. So that is data work. In this example, the type of task, the outsourcing through a third-party company to a low-income country, the vulnerability of the workers, the consequences that the workers face, all that is, as I said, a textbook example of how data work is structured. This is not an exception. It is the rule of how data work is. And the irony here is, and here is where we come to the part with the AI ethics. The irony here is that all this was done in the name of creating a safer ChatGPT, one that it was supposed to be free from toxicity and free from biases. But for that, to achieve that, these workers had to go through hell, right? So cases like this, and this is my second point that I want to make with this example, is that cases like this show something that we've been saying for many years now, and that is that AI ethics cannot just be about bias mitigation, cannot just be about fairness metrics, and all those things that computer scientists do, which are okay and are necessary, but this is not it. This is not all. Power concentration in the AI industry, power asymmetries within the AI industry and the people that work within the AI industry, labor should become a fundamental dimension of AI ethics, research, and discourse. So I've been doing this work for 6 years, and I am a sociologist and a computer scientist, but first and foremost, I am a sociologist. I feel I identify as a sociologist. And I started doing this work almost 6 years ago, when I was hired to join a group, a research group in Berlin, where I was the only sociologist or the only social scientist among many computer scientists. And this was a group that was dealing with AI ethics. It was supposed to be AI ethics research. And my colleagues were doing bias mitigation, again, fairness metrics, explainability techniques, and I was unable to grasp that. And for a long time, I felt like I was failing them and I was failing my job because I couldn't really grasp what was going on, until I realized that I was never going to understand AI ethics through those things, because those things are artifacts. And I was a sociologist, so I needed to understand the human component, the relational component. I needed to understand the social component of this. And also, that was the time when I realized that among many computer scientists, but also especially within the AI, or among AI practitioners, there is a very narrow understanding of what data is. In computer science, data is considered something that is a given, something that it just lays around, that can be collected and used as is. But I guess that any of you who have ever worked with data before, I'm not saying data for AI, data, research data, any type of data, know that there is a lot of labor that goes into creating data. That data is a product. That data is not just laying around or can just be collected like that and used as such. Conversely, in the AI industry, there are things that are very common, like, for example, saying something like raw data, as if data was something, a raw material that is just like, hangs from a tree and can be just picked up. Or ground truth data. This is another term that is very, very often used in the AI industry. Ground truth data, like as if data was something that fundamentally contains a factual truth. Sorry. So, with realizing that there was a discrepancy between my understanding and the understanding of many social scientists of data, and the understanding that many computer scientists, and especially AI practitioners, have of data, I thought it was important to go and look who is producing data, which unequal social relations are involved in the production of data for AI systems. And I went out. I conducted observations, workshops, interviews, documents, and interface analysis. I am now involved in a co-research project in which we engage data workers in different countries of the world and conduct research with them. We develop research questions. We conduct studies and work on the findings. So I work with communities of data workers in all the places that you see here on the slide. Syria, Iraq, Bulgaria, Argentina, Germany, Venezuela, Kenya, and Brazil. Many of the workers, as I said before, are refugees. Many of them migrants to those places, and all of them, believe me, were in different kinds of very vulnerable situations. And the questions that I had, or that I still have, or that moved me or moved my research is, first of all, I want to know where, how, and by whom is data for AI produced. So if we start from the point that data is not a given, data is produced, then who is producing that data and under which conditions? But then I didn't want to stop at, developing a catalog of terrible labor conditions and that's it. I also want to know what does this mean for the data that is produced, for the data sets, and also for the AI systems. What does it do to the data to be produced under precarious labor conditions, to be the product of unequal social relations? What does it do to the data? What does it do to the systems that are trained on that data? And what does it do to all of us, the communities impacted by AI systems that are trained on that data? So let us start with some answers. First of all, data work. What are the specific tasks that are involved in the production of data? What does data work actually mean? So in general, we use this taxonomy or this classification in 4 groups when it comes to data work. So the first type of task has to do with data generation. And data generation can range from scraping data that is publicly, or information that is publicly available on the internet, so taking anything that is, according to specific parameters, but anything that is publicly available on the internet, and using that to workers producing data with their own bodies, as workers recording their own voices, workers taking selfies of themselves, uploading pictures of their families, their friends, their homes, their cities, their towns, and also of objects within their homes, or as in this case, upload a picture of a prescription with your, upload a picture of a document with your prescription values, so the glasses, right? Like, And by the way, all these 4 examples are taken from real task instructions given to data workers, to real data workers. So that is data generation. Then we have data annotation. Data annotation is about interpreting the content of data and then adding labels to it so that it's machine readable in a way. So when it comes to, for example, images, you would say the workers would interpret the content of the image and add labels accordingly. So, for example, saying, okay, this is a tree, this is a car, this is a person. It can also be about keywording, and many other things. It can also be about, for example, here, sexually explicit, suggestive, non-sexual, which also indicates that workers are again confronted with material that is could potentially make them uncomfortable. The third type of task is algorithmic verification. That has to do is when the algorithm is already trained at one point. So it's about perfecting the algorithm. So workers would just receive the output of a of an AI system, and would classify that output in accurate or inaccurate, or appropriate or appropriate, as the ChatGPT workers did. Also, to say, well, this is toxic or not toxic, and so on, or harmful or not. Imagine, like, for example, a recommender system that, like, for example, when you watch a movie on Netflix and the system recommends you, okay, well, since you watched this, you might want to watch this other thing, and, having to actually rate that. Well, this was helpful or not helpful, or was unrelated, or was, sometimes those recommendations can be harmful, establish relations that are, that could be racist or could be misogynist, and so on. So that's the work that these workers do in kind of flagging things that are not supposed to be happening. And finally, the last type of task is impersonation, as in workers pretending to be AI systems. And generally, when I talk about this, people are surprised or think this is an exception. But no, it's no exception. This happens a lot. There are, in many cases, where the system breaks down, or when there is no AI system, there are workers somewhere, mostly in the so-called global south, that pretend to or replace the AI system. Like, for example, in this case, workers pretending to be a chatbot. There are also examples from our colleague Antonio Gasilli and his co-authors who talks about how workers are behind so-called AI cameras that are sold as being, intelligent and autonomous, and what is behind that is a bunch of workers, in this case in Madagascar, just monitoring the cameras 24/7 and flagging anomalies per hand. So another thing that is important to know about data work is that it is mostly outsourced, as you might have guessed from the examples that I have brought up already. And when I say outsource, I say it is mostly, when it's done at scale, it is generally not done in the same organizations, in the same buildings, but also not in the same countries as the work of the modelers. The modelers are the AI practitioners who actually are working on training the AI, the ones who develop the algorithms and so on that go into the AI systems. Also here, it's worth mentioning that both types of tasks, the work of the modelers and the work of the data workers, are regarded very differently also in popular discourse. So when we talk about the work of the modelers, we tend to think and hear things like, well, the genius engineer in Silicon Valley, totally glamorous, who has developed this groundbreaking algorithm. And when we talk or read or hear about the data workers, we hear things like low-skill jobs or blue-collar jobs, and so on. We also, it's very, even in academia, it's very common to talk about the micro work as if, the size of the task was telling of the quality of the work or the importance of the work. So, and when I say outsource, I'm talking about, outsourcing platforms like Amazon Mechanical Turk. Many of you might know that. There are many others. So through platforms that don't really hire the workers just go in there, they register, they search for tasks, they sign up to participate in a task, they do the task, and then that's it. They don't have an employment relationship with the platform. And the requesters, they just post the task there and hope that the pool of workers will just complete the task. Or there are also specialized companies like the one I showed you with the example on the first slide, Zama, that company in Kenya. Like that, there are many. And on the side of the requesters, we have, tech companies of all sizes. We have the big tech giants in Silicon Valley and in the US in general, also, smaller startups. And we also have research organizations like universities, like research institutes, that sometimes, in many cases, outsource data work tasks as a form, as part of advancing AI research. But here I have to also make a comment or a clarification that not every company and not every research organization or university is in a position to actually outsource data work. So if we look at this map is part of the research from my colleagues at Deep Lab. So if we look at this map, you see we have in blue the requesters, and in red we have the data workers, right? So the major concentration of requesters and data workers. So if we look at the blue dots, the requesters, we have to look, we see here in the US, in North America in general, but especially the US and Canada, we see a big concentration. We will find a lot of blue dots here in Central and Northern Europe. Now if we look at the red dots, the data workers, we need to start going south and going east. So, as you can imagine from this geographical distribution, for the clients, outsourcing data work is considerably cheaper than having it done in-house or having it done in the same countries where they are. Why is it cheaper? Well, first, let's look at the map, because these companies and platforms often target very poor regions of the world, regions that have been affected by war, by economic crisis, even by natural catastrophe. And within those regions, they specifically target underserved populations. So in this field and in this business, there is a lot of, you will hear a lot of programs that are, well, we help single mothers, we help refugees, we help people with disabilities, all this under the slogan of we bring jobs to underserved populations, we bring jobs to people in need, which is not a lie, but what is untold is the other part of this story that remains untold is that these companies and also the requesters, they make huge profits on the back of these workers, and they profit from their need for jobs and from the lack of opportunities that they have in the places where they are and in the situations in which they find themselves. And also, this outsourcing is so cheap because, as I said before, these workers generally are paid per task. They are not paid for their time, the time it takes to find a task, a suitable task, the time it takes for them to understand the task, interpret the instructions, and so on. They are only paid per click, per picture that they upload, and so on. So, and they also, their relationship to the client and to the platform or the company is generally not one that is of employment, so they don't count with the benefits or the security that we relate to more traditional employment relationships. They don't have, I don't know, for example, a health insurance in most of the cases, and so on. They also never know how much they will make by the end of the month because, again, there is no any type of job security. So from these things, we already see that there is a huge power differential between requesters and data workers. And the task instructions that are given to the data workers really reflect that type of imposition and that type of power asymmetries very well, actually. So I will show you now four examples of task instructions. This is from a study Julian Posada and I conducted a few years back in which we analyzed over 200 task instructions given to data workers in Venezuela and in Argentina. So the first example shows, this is a racial classification, so the workers are supposed to guess people's race from an image as if that was possible, but let's think that that is possible, and let's look at the categories that are given to them in terms of establishing a classification. So, as you might guess, the categories are very North American centric. This is a type of classification that in many other places don't really make sense. It is based on somewhere else in this instruction set. It was based on protected categories according to U.S. legislation. And this is a common thread that when it comes to data work instructions. The options for labeling and collecting data and verifying algorithmic outputs are always predefined and fixed by the requesters. The workers are not in a position in which they could change, add, or even question these categories. The requesters, the blue dots that we have seen, they decide what categories to use to interpret data, what information is to consider data. They decide all this. And also, the instructions and labels, as you see here, are in most of the cases based on the worldviews of and assumptions of requesters who are in most of the cases located in the global north, as we saw on the map before. But in many cases, they don't really make sense to the data labeler or the data worker in Argentina, Venezuela, Syria, Kenya, or the majority of the world for that matter. Also, to add another level of difficulty and distancing, all of the instructions that I will show you are in English, and not because I translated them for this talk, it's because they are given to the workers in English. Those are the original. So imagine being someone from Venezuela, a Latin American speaking country, and receiving these instructions in English. You don't speak English, so you need to resort to Google Translate or to your friends or whatever to have that translate, and that's all unpaid time. Right? And also you don't know if you understood that correctly and if you're going to be able to perform the task correctly. And on whether you're accurate, you do this right, depends whether you will get paid or not. Okay, but maybe you saw that the last category here is ambiguous and here is other. And maybe you're thinking, wait, at least there's the possibility to label someone's face as ambiguous, and with that you signal it's not really possible to get someone's race from a picture, or someone can be mixed-raced, or to label that. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but in this case, and also in the second example that refers to gender, those categories are not there to refer to actually signal that there is more than one interpretation of data to data, or that those categories shouldn't be mutually exclusive, but those they are there to signal what says in the second example, that there is no face in the box, or that the file cannot be opened, or that the picture is blurry, that the person is not looking to the camera, and so on. And these type of residual categories are very common in the instructions, but in all 200 instructions, or more than 200 that we analyze, they always refer to this type of cases and not to the fact that, well, maybe someone is non-binary and not, male or female. Okay, so also most of the instructions, here are two more examples. Most of the instructions even contain this type of warnings, or I would call them threats, that if workers are not accurate, they will be banned from the job or even expelled from the platform. And let me be clear here, there is nowhere in the instructions, there is a clear translation in terms of what is meant by high quality or accuracy. There is no neutral and objective value for accuracy. In all cases, accuracy and high quality means interpreting the data according to the instructions provided by the client. So being a proxy of the client and doing what the client says. Also, as you can imagine, these constant warnings cause that performing the task according to what the client expects becomes the main worry for data workers. It becomes the main rationale behind every task that they perform. I witnessed in a couple of cases where workers were unsure about what they were supposed to do with the data, about the categories that were given to them. I remember very well one person that we interviewed, one of the Venezuelan workers that we interviewed with Julian, and he said something like, well, he's a black man from Venezuela, and he was like, well, if I had to label myself according to those categories, I wouldn't know if I'm Latinx or African American, but it doesn't matter what I think. By now I know the client and I know what they expect, and I just do that. By doing that, I will get my payment, and that's it. So in many cases where the workers are unsure of how to interpret the data, and in the cases where they can talk to each other, be it online in Facebook forums or in other fora, or when they sit together in places like Zama or other companies where they sit next to each other and they can consult with each other and talk to each other in terms of, okay, what do you think that this means and what to do? How did you solve this problem? In all of those cases, the rationale is never, hey, how could we label this data in a better way? How can we produce better data? What do you think that would be better for the system? What do you think that would be less racist or less misogynist? No, the rationale is always, hey, do you know this client? Do you know what they would want? Have we worked for this person before? How did we deal with this in the past? So the answer to uncertainty is always, let's imagine what the client would want. Let's be let's put ourselves in the client's shoe and try to, make them happy. And that's not surprising, actually. This rationale is not surprising. So the workers are in a vulnerable situations. They depend on these jobs to make ends meet. In many cases, they depend on the job even to secure their visa or to secure their resident permit to stay in their respective countries. So it is not strange that they would think, well, this is easy. I need to do what the client wants, and I want to keep my job, and I need to get my paycheck by the end of the week. Also, the interfaces, this is not just a thing about the instructions. The interfaces that are used by the workers to do this type of tasks reinforce this type of impositions. They are designed to reinforce this type of imposition. So here, it doesn't matter, probably you cannot read what says here, but it's suffice to say that this is just a drop-down menu for image classification. So the workers would have to label this image according to these categories, and it has to do with age. Guess how old am I? And here the categories are baby, toddler, preteen, and so on. So in all cases, this is more or less what it looks like. So the workers receive this type of predefined categories. They are embedded in the interface, and they need to use that drop-down menu, and they cannot change, add, or remove anything. As you see here, this is the interface for the rights. The labelers, the data workers, they don't have any rights, basically. And this is in more than one sense, right? So they don't have any rights, and the project owner is the one who can edit attributes, upload images, and so on. Guess who's the project owner? Is the client. So in sum, narrow instructions, as the one that we see before, work interfaces, precarious labor conditions, and local contexts shaped by economic crisis, low employment rates. They all ensure that data workers remain obedient to clients in an implicit and normalized way. Because in the end, the industry and its processes are designed to keep the status quo, to preserve the power of requesters, and to keep specific discourses produced and reproduced. the data production dispositive, as we have called it, I don't know if I need to explain. I mean, you're all media students and scholars, so I thought dispositive and apparatus is clear, more or less. Okay, yes, should be. Okay, so just for the record, the data production dispositive, what we have called the data production dispositive is this combination of discursive practices that are embedded in task instructions, the practices that the workers naturalize this, this reaction and this interaction with the instructions, with the interfaces, with the requesters, the fact that they actually, the rationale is, okay, I need to do what the client wants. And also materializations of the dispositive, this apparatus, like the work interfaces that I showed you before. All this combination of elements and their interaction, which is the dispositive, is designed to ensure that the data sets and the AI systems reproduce specific social orders. And they do reproduce specific social orders. So let us look at this example. And I want to make clear, I'm not trying to convey a political message here. I'm really trying to show you how they reproduce social orders without judging them at this point. This is a screenshot I personally took, so this is nothing tricked. I can also show you. I have ChatGPT open in my computer if you want to check that. So I took this screenshot yesterday. And here the question is whether people in general deserve to be free. And the answer is, well, that depends on whose people. So in the first example, we see that the answer is clearly, yes, all people deserve to be free. In the second example, when it comes to Palestinian people, the answer is, well, that depends. It is a matter of opinion and perspective, right? And this is not wrong. The outputs of AI systems are full of specific worldviews and perspectives. The worldviews and perspectives of those who decide what is what data to be used, what is correct in the data, how data is supposed to be labeled, what is considered biased and what is not biased. And those decisions are imposed on the data workers, and through them, through their labors, they are imposed on the data and the systems, and through them on all of us. Because, yeah, today is these people who are, well, it depends on whether they, the answer depends on whether they are supposed to be free or not. Tomorrow we can be any of us. So, yeah. Coming back to the data workers, the fact that they are not, that they are supposed to remain obedient, and they do remain obedient, should not lead us to believe that they don't have thoughts for themselves, that they are dumb, that they are low skill, or that they don't really think. They do think a lot. They have concerns for themselves. It's just that this apparatus that I was showing you before, the data production dispositive, is designed in a way that keeps them silent. It's designed in a way that keeps the status quo reproduced. So this is an example of a workshop that we conducted with Syrian data workers and their clients in Denmark. And this is an exercise, this is a role play exercise in which we asked them to role play each other. So what you're seeing here is the requesters, the AI practitioners from Denmark, role playing the Syrian labelers. And what they were supposed to do is come up with information that they thought it was important for labelers to perform their tasks. So if you were a labeler, what would you need to know? And these are the blue cards, the yellow cards that you see here. So they wanted to know things like classes for labeling, what is the goal, what is the annotation precision, what are edge cases, labeling type, and so on. And then finally, to conclude this activity, we asked the actual labelers to rate how they thought they had been role-played, if they thought this information was important, given that they are doing this job day in, day out. And they said, yeah, it's all important, of course. We need to know all these things, edge cases, annotation precision, labeling type, and so on. This all is important. But there are two things that we would like to know and nobody ever tells us. And also these people that just role-played us didn't think of that. And these are the two blue cards that you see here. So the first thing that they wanted to know was about money. And that is, how much will I earn from this task? And this may sound surprising. You know, being a worker who knows how much she will make by the end of the month, this may sound ridiculous. How can it be that workers in this world don't know how much they will earn before they take on a task? Well, data workers never do, because of the fact that they are not paid for their time. They are paid per task, and they never know how long a task will take, and they never know how many of those they will be able to do and to complete. And they never know if, when completing one task, they immediately will receive another one, or that there will be a pause for the rest of the week and they will not be able to make enough to pay rent. So this might sound obvious, but this was insanely important for the workers because they don't get to know how much they will make if they take on a task. And the second thing that they wanted to know was about ethics. And I remember the silence in the room when they said, well, we have a question about ethics. And the requesters were like, whoa, we've never had this before, workers having ethical concerns. And the question was specifically, what are the implications of this data? And they elaborated on that. They told us, well, we mean two things by that. The first one is, what are the implications of this data in terms of where does this data come from? Do we have consent from the data subjects? What is going to be trained on this data? What type of system, what kind of impact will it have? But also, the second thing that I want to know as a worker is, what are the implications of this data on me? Am I going to be confronted with disturbing material? Am I going to be confronted with things that make me uncomfortable or that will make me psychologically ill? If so, I want to have a trigger warning. And again, this might sound obvious or surprising, but even in cases where workers are confronted with terrible materials, there is hardly ever a trigger warning on the instructions. So either you guess from the instructions, if you are supposed to classify something into, sexual abuse or not sexual abuse, you might guess that you will be confronted with material that is hard to watch. But if not, then you don't know, and you just find out when you open the first data point. And also, they said something that actually brings the two cards together, and that is, if I'm going to be confronted with material that will make me sick, then it needs to be worth my while. So the two things need to be connected. I want to be paid enough so that, I can maybe afford therapy afterwards. So, as we said before, data is the product of asymmetrical social, economic, and labor relations, meaning that whoever has money and power to pay for data worker also has the power to impose their preferred interpretations and classifications and worldviews, not only on the workers, but on the systems and on all of us. Because what goes into data and what doesn't go into data and how data is interpreted defines what AI systems will be able to reproduce about the world, to understand about the world, where they will be able to give us answers about the world, just as ChatGPT did yesterday. And they will be able to make diagnoses about all of us. And in many cases, those diagnoses from AI systems are considered neutral and true. So it is important to care about that. So we should care, again, about how data is produced, not just in terms of solidarity with less fortunate workers somewhere in the global south. And I hope that solidarity moves many of you, it moves me at least. But also, it's important to convey the message that this is not just about those workers. This not only affects those workers, these affect all of us. Because the same power imbalances that affect the workers, they decisively shape data systems and the type of outputs that these systems do. Okay, finally, takeaways or summarizing. There is no AI without data, and there is no data without human labor. The production of that data is often outsourced, as I said before, outsourced to the global south and to places with, high unemployment rates, places where economic crisis, natural disasters, and political crisis, war in many cases, have brought workers to a situation in which they don't have many options. These workers work under very precarious conditions. The data industry is designed for producing data that reproduces specific dominant worldviews, the worldviews of requesters, and in general of those who have more power, more money, and are in a better position. Task instructions, work interfaces, and the vulnerability of workers, they all contribute to keep workers obedient, and the preferences of requesters unquestioned, because who's going to question the boss, right? This means that the labor conditions involved in data work have a crucial effect on data systems and, as I said before, on the communities impacted on those systems. To conclude, labor, and because of all this, labor should become a central dimension of AI ethics and discourse, because as I call this talk, there is indeed no ethical AI without data work. So that's it. Thank you. I leave you here with this meme that I believe perfectly summarizes the content of this talk, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
I want to give one mic here for the room, but I just want to start by saying, first of all, thank you for giving us a heads up on such an important topic, because there's so much, way too many myths about technology and the neutrality of technology. So it's kind of refreshing that we have someone pointing out to a question, which is the question of labor and exploitation, that gets completely erased in the narrative of neutrality of technology in general and specifically about AI. So thank you so much for emphasizing this aspect, and I would have tons of questions, but I just want to stick to a couple of comments and questions and leave then the room for the students or everybody who wants to jump on it. So first of all, you described the situation that I would call, and there are other scholars who actually use this word, including, for example, Nick Couldry, Ulises Mejias, who call it data colonialism. So they have used the word colonialism to describe this situation of exploitation and violence on the workers that you have just described. So, but not everybody agrees on it, because some folks would think that using the word colonialism is too much. It's not really expropriation. It's not really destruction as it used to be in historical colonialism. So I would love to have your take on it, because you have described a situation that clearly resembles the colonial situation, in which you have predators taking over the capability, the skills, and the lives of people living in the so-called global south, and clearly a situation of exploitation in which, economic exploitation, but also, all the consequences that you have mentioned when it comes to the psyche also of the worker. So I want to ask you whether you think that it's appropriate to talk about data colonialism, or you think that this is like too much of an exaggeration in this situation. And if you, in that case, if you have a better word to describe this process which is going on today underneath AI and technology. And the second thing would be, I guess many students, when I teach these kind of things in my class, they say, okay, what's the way out? Because I'm sure none of us would like to leave the students in a situation of despair. So what should we do once we know that there is such brutality and exploitation underneath AI? What's the response? What should we do if we want to be proactive and not just being left in a situation of nihilism?
Thank you, Donatella, for that. So the first question, I will start with the first question. The first question, I'm somewhere in between. So, and I will tell you why. So I do just like Coldry and Mejias, I do acknowledge that there is a colonial trace in how these things are structured. And I think both authors did a great job in their book, The Cost of Connection, in actually showing how those traces manifest today. And I do believe that's accurate, and I do believe that is a way of seeing things. But on the other hand, I cannot help but think and feel that such framings always come from us, people in privileged situations in the global north. Whereas when we ask the workers, they have a different view on this issue. They are proud of doing data work. You know, I always tell this story, but in Argentina, the people doing the data work, they were specific, and when I say these companies target specifically vulnerable populations, I mean it. So they hire specifically workers from the poor neighborhoods, slums in Buenos Aires and around Buenos Aires. And for these workers are really, really proud of what they do. They sometimes, you know, told me, like, yeah, you know, what can I tell you? I'm really happy. And I wouldn't change this for another type of job. Also, you know, not to say what are my options. I'm the first one I'm the first person in my family to have a desk job. I tell in my neighborhood, I'm going to the office and people think highly of me. So, you know, why would they, you know, there's a big difference between how workers perceive this and how we scholars talk about this in many cases. With this, I don't mean that it is not true what I just told you, what Mejias and Coldry write in their book. These are all facts, and the workers see that. The workers tell us, well, this is a matter of exploitation. I feel this is unfair how I'm being paid, or this is unfair. I would like to be able to save money, and I would like to be able to send my kids to university, but I can't because this work is just about making ends meet. But I still love this job, and I still feel good doing it. So the only thing that I want is to keep on doing this work, but I want to be acknowledged. I want it to be acknowledged as valuable work. I want it to be paid accordingly. I want to have some sort of say in what I'm saying. I don't want to be a proxy of the client. I want to be able to think for myself and actually collaborate with the work. The collaboration is another word that comes up very often. I want to collaborate with the client, and I don't care if the client gets even richer than they are. But I want to be paid a decent wage that allows me to, you know, not only to pay rent, but also maybe to think of moving out of the slum. So I'm somewhere in between. I don't know if that's an answer or opens more questions. And the second question is, what can we do? There are many things that can be done, and I think many of us can be doing them. So there's, of course, the high-level answer of we need regulation, and we need this, and we need that, and that's all true. I think one start was like we've been collaborating with Senator Mackey in the US, who sent a letter to the tech giants asking them about data work. I sat in a meeting with one of his collaborators, helping, you know, with the questions. They also interviewed many of the workers that co-research with us. So that's a start at the high level of this. But I think that we, as being that many research institutions are also in the same position to be requesters, I think we all, even students, can be demanding fairer treatment for data workers in the respective institutions. So, for example, you know, thinking of data workers as research subjects, as they are in many cases. In many cases, they do, you know, they fill out surveys and so on. So thinking of them as research participants, and in the same way we have IRBs to actually tell us how we are supposed to treat our research participants fairly. Why not demanding that our IRBs also establish rules for what is fair payment for data workers, what are fair deadlines, what to do when a worker doesn't really works to our satisfaction, instead of giving them a bad rating on the platform, maybe talk to them and things like this. I think there are things at the really at the large scale and top circles that can be done, but there's also many things that we people in academia can be doing, and also talk about this. I think it is important, but also with that I have to say visibility is not enough. So I'm talking about this, I talk to the press, we all talk about this. This made the cover of Time, and still not much has changed, so I think that we are at a point that we need actual change.
What about data auditing? Do you think data auditing can be, because now some people are advocating for data auditing, so treating data as
I am very skeptical of those things. The same thing that when people talk about transparency and data documentation and so on, the problem with those things is that it is always about the product, the data set. So what's being audited is the thing that has already been made, and not the ways in which the data has been constructed. Many data documentation frameworks that are very famous, they aim at documenting the data. So, they ask questions like, okay, what's in this data? What are the taxonomies used to classify the data? What are the labels? What are recommended uses? Who, in which year has it been produced? For what has it been used? But not many of these frameworks, and not to say none of these frameworks, ask who is producing this data, under which conditions, who decides how to label this data, who decided what data to consider accurate or inaccurate or true or not true, and so on. So audits are good, but we always need to, when it comes to any audit, who is auditing and following which parameters, and second, what is being audited? Is the relationship, the labor relationship that is taking place being audited, or is the data set in itself? Yeah.
Thank you. I want to leave the floor to
further questions.
I wanted to ask a question to kind of build on how you said it made the cover of Time magazine, but not enough has been done yet. In any of the countries that you have been working in or done work in, has there been any effort at all by governments to push for some kind of regulations to help out these data workers? And if not, what would you say some of the first steps towards that would need to be?
Thank you for that question, it's a very important one. There's been something around data work when the AI Act has been discussed, and again, in the US through Senators Mackey and others who are pushing for this, there is a discussion around this. But I'm always a little bit reluctant to believe that this will lead to real change. As with any regulation, the people, the people in the lowest ranks of the command chain are the ones that get impacted less even by well-intended regulation. But also the fact that, these regulations, who's regulating and who is coming up with the regulations, and what are the interests that are involved, we saw Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, going on tour through Europe this summer, as the discussions around the AI Act were taking place. On the one hand saying, oh, existential risk, please regulate us, but then saying, well, but don't regulate us too much, please. And this guy, he was heard in every single office, in every single parliament throughout Europe. Now, I can ask any of the data workers I know if they have ever been heard. I have never been heard about these things. So, whose interests are included in these forms of regulations? That's another question that we need to be asking. This is why I'm not really, a fan of these type of solution. Of course, it's great that they exist, but I think there are many things that can be done at larger scale that are important.
one short answer and one longer one. The first question is, does education level matter for the people who do this work? Obviously, they have to be literate, but beyond that, is there some minimal education? And then the second question, which is a little bit larger, is another aspect of labor that you didn't mention here, but I imagine is also being addressed elsewhere in research, is the unpaid labor of artists and writers that are being scraped off the internet and being repurposed for these AI systems. And then what are some ways to address that? Because that seems to be a huge issue that's coming up now.
Yeah, both great questions, thank you. To the first one, this has changed a lot over the years, and also with the development of yet more sophisticated AI systems. So when I started this research 6 years ago, it was in most of the instructions and job ads, there was no requirement of, having to have, a certain level of education in one specific discipline or more or whatever, or knowledge in one thing. Also because many of these companies had training programs, so they would train the workers to do what they needed. So, if this was about computer vision and labeling or segmenting image data, they would have like courses on Photoshop. English courses were everywhere because, as I said, all instructions were in English and so on. So there was no requirement, but I have to say that around 80% of the people I interviewed in all of these places, they had at least a college degree, especially among the refugees. In many of the cases, the refugees that I interviewed in Bulgaria, for example, I would say all of them, I don't remember anyone not having a college degree among the people that I interviewed there in that specific site. And also many of them, they were waiting, for the paperwork to actually go and do what they studied, their profession to work on their profession. So, but as I said before, this has changed now. So now we are, and I'm saying now this year, we are seeing more and more job ads that ask for specific skills, and you just named the artists. So there is a lot of, specific requests for artists, for writers, for people having, and in those ads, it's specific, okay, you need to have an art degree, or you need to have a degree on journalism, or, I don't know, creative writing, or, or adjacent fields. So, and that is because there is a turn now within these new models. We believe there is a turn that is not bad. It's actually a positive development. There is a turn from, we take all this garbage from the internet and we use all of it, and then we think of debiasing, or we think of removing the toxicity from the model. And I'm now speaking as a computer scientist, but this is the way the systems had been trained up until now, and now there is the need for more specific data, and this is why we are seeing ads in which you would have professional data workers who are also professional in one specific field, creating the data that is specific to that model. So smaller data sets, highly curated data sets that have been produced for that specific purpose. The second question, sorry. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a super important point, and it's related to what I was saying before. In those cases, in the cases where the workers are recruited and are being asked to have a professional degree in one field, well, you see the need for the data, but up until now, that data had been stolen from the artists, from writers, people who have, spent, I was talking to a writer friend a couple of weeks ago. He spent 4 years writing a book, and he says, well, now I found out, now it's possible to find out whether your writing has been used to train things like ChatGPT, and he was like, I found out it's been used to train an AI system, and a system that maybe will replace me as a journalist, or, in the case of visual artists, a system that is able to produce art. so to say. That brings me also to another important point. Not only the work of artists is being taken, we as users, in many cases, we perform data work, we perform unpaid data work. For example, every time we solve a reCAPTCHA quiz, and we need to do that to enter a website or to check our emails, whatever. You know, every time we do that, we are doing labeling work, and nobody tells us that's labeling work, and we are doing this for free. And imagine, I don't know if you think of how often do you do this reCAPTCHA type of quiz in a month. I don't know, I would say at least twice a month. I do it, when not more often. And imagine how many people in the world, how many internet users in the world are doing this, so how much unpaid labor that is. In cases where we are forced to show our face for a facial recognition system, like for example in many airports in the US, this is just common, you know, facial recognition, and then your data is being used, your face, your biometrics are being used to perfect that very same system, and we don't know if any others. So yeah, unpaid work, not only from artists, but also from artists, it's a thing. To that, Timnit has written a paper, has just published a paper with a bunch of artists, visual artists, about this issue. I think I can only recommend that. I don't remember now the title, but it's a very interesting paper.
Are there other questions?
Okay, so you just responded to his first question, saying about how now they're doing like looking for people with university degrees in certain like fields and stuff, so they can get like highly curated data entries, and you said that was a good thing. But don't just like many universities in like higher education levels and stuff just continue to reinforce like dominant worldviews?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you for that clarification. Yes, that doesn't change the fact that these systems will reinforce dominant worldviews, but at least it's a step towards, you know, having these companies being accountable for using copyright material. So, you know, if they are going to be using, for example, this example of the writer with the book, you know, if they are going to be using his writing, then at least they should pay him for that. So that's what I meant. And also what I meant with smaller data sets, highly curated data sets, is that in those cases, the distinction and the regarding of workers as low skill then hopefully changes, because then we cannot be talking about data workers as being low skill anymore. You know, if you're asking for workers who have specifically who have a college degree in one specific field, an experience, whatever, you know, then the view of these workers as just being micro workers changes. But yeah, you're right. Then we still have the other problem that affects all of us. Yes. But the only solution for that is thinking of power concentration in the AI industry, who has power, and we are talking about companies that in many cases are even more powerful than many nation states, so and richer and larger. So I think this is why I insist, this is why we should be talking about this. Yeah.
Are there any more questions? If not, I do have a question, and it is about, I'm wondering whether in your research you encountered forms of workers organizing, or whether you have been also sort of supporting those efforts.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I love it that you all, you know, with the questions, and it happens very often that you all bring me back to ending this in a more positive note, because my talks tend to be very depressing, and I apologize for that. Yes, I've seen many forms of worker organizing, from very small types of resistance and pushing for change to really unionizing workers, forming unions. So The smaller examples were, like, for example, workers in Argentina pushing back then, and this was 2018 or 19, before the pandemic, the data workers in the office, everyone was allowed to have, I don't know, 1 or 2 days of home office, but not the data workers. And this was the untold reason for this was that they were living in the slums, and therefore they were labeled as dangerous or maybe, you know, being prone to stole the laptops, so they wouldn't let the workers take the laptops with them home. And they started pushing for that, and they got that. They got the chance to do twice a week home office, which then for the company became very handy when the pandemic hit and everyone had to do home office anyway. So they had the infrastructure already there. So that's one small example. And then we have the big example of the workers in Kenya who have, at Sama, the company that I showed you at the beginning, the workers have unionized, they have organized and unionized, and they are now pushing, now they don't want to call it anymore like the Kenyan Union for Data Workers, or in that case, content moderators. They want to create a Pan-African type of union, so to engage workers from other places. So that's one positive example. We are in contact with those workers, and it's very exciting to see. Another worker group is in Germany. These are workers that in many cases are migrants and refugees, workers who depend on the visa, on the job to keep their visa in most of the cases. And they have just created a workers' council within the company to ask for better conditions. They are organizing. Many of them are unionized through another union that is not just specific to data work. And that's a group of workers we are actively supporting. So yes, the project that I'm doing now that I said at one point with these 5 different countries is called the Data Workers Inquiry. So the idea is that the workers conduct their own research, but research in this case is, I would say, an excuse for workers to talk to each other and organize. So we have, you know, core researchers among the workers, and we tell them, well, you know, now you've developed these research questions and this method, so now go and find out. And by finding out, they talk to others and they come up with plans and they organize. And that's what's going on in Germany, and we hope that it will happen in other places.
I want to take the chance to ask you a question about the way in which you have designed your research, because it's really interesting. You know, you said you are a social scientist and also a computer scientist, so the emphasis that you are putting on the ethnographic part of your work is of a great interest. I think there are very little works that have this ethnographic component. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how your research method and how you have carried out your research in 2 different sites, in Bulgaria and Venezuela, I think, or Argentina. Yeah. And also because there is this issue of NDAs with the workers. So how did you manage, you know, to get access to the site, and how did you protect the workers? So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the design part of your research.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my first fieldwork back in 2018 was in Bulgaria, and then I went to Argentina. Those are the places where I spend most of my time. And then from then I started. Then the pandemic hit, so it was like more of a digital type of ethnography, working with people who were in Turkey, who were in Syria, and then from the end, still in contact with the people in Argentina and in Bulgaria. So the first 2 cases were really ethnographic fieldwork, going there, spending time with them, sometimes even when I had the chance and was allowed to, doing the work, trying these interfaces, collecting documents in many cases when I was able to and allowed, and then talking to the workers, spending time with them. So that was the first part to the NDA. I was very lucky that both companies in Argentina and Bulgaria, they were fairly small. So they didn't, I signed an NDA, but the workers didn't have an NDA in place. So they were just like talking. And I was able to protect them in terms of anonymizing, in terms of many of the things that I knew were going to be potentially dangerous to publish. I didn't publish, or I only published them after I have done fieldwork and research in other places, so I can just, you know, mix and combine and never say these were the workers who told me this. So those were the ways that we protected them back then. Now that we are doing more of a research action project that is fairly dangerous in many cases, because we are talking workers organizing, we have different things in place. Like, for example, one of the things that we also, so the first one is the workers do the research. So we guide, we help where we can, we collaborate, but we are not the ones to actually publish these things. The findings belong to the workers, and they decide what is okay to publish and what is not. So I think that's the thing that is to me most important, because I don't know, you know, like as a researcher, I could say, well, you know, this will make a great paper and I will get best paper awards for this. But, you know, if this is going to put the workers in danger, then there's no use for me. So the workers doing the research and them deciding what's going to be published is, for me, a measure of, okay, well, nobody's going to bring themselves in danger on purpose. So, you know, if they decide, then it's good. In another thing another decision that we made when doing this data workers inquiry is that all the people that were going to be working with us should be in the process of organizing, or should have already identified in their workplace that there is trouble. We are not going to, you know, preach to them and tell them, well, don't you see that there's all this that is wrong about your workplace, so why don't you organize? We thought that would potentially bring a lot of workers in trouble, people who maybe, you know, are naive to say, well, yeah, that's a great idea, let's organize, but they don't know what could be the consequences of that. So in those cases, we were very thorough with the selection of the workplaces and the workers, and selected really places that were already, you know, where things were already being discussed, and there was like a need identified by the workers in terms of organizing and changing things. Yeah, I think those are the things that and also we are in contact, like for example in the case of Kenya, we are in contact with a group of lawyers in Europe, but also in Kenya, who, because there is also a lawsuit in place, who are advising the workers, and who, you know, we can resort to if things get ugly.
I think it's very important also that you have this, let's say, ethical approach to collecting data, because I mean, it's, which is not, sometimes not common, you know, because as you said, I mean, sometimes from a researcher point of view, it's just that collecting this data would make me, you know, famous within my field, and so I would treat the subject as a passive, you know, just an informant, whereas it seems to me that you are trying to design your ethnography in a way that is respectful also of what the workers, I mean, this is really, you know, it's great because this kind of research are starting right now as we speak. There are not so many works that engage with workers and give them agency in a way, you know, and make them visible, because that's also one of the most important points, I believe, to make labor visible, because today is quite, you know, hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if there are other questions. I didn't want to monopolize the conversation. Actually, I think we can also call it a day, because it's almost 8 p.m. here. So we thank you so much, Milagros, for being with us today. And raising all these important points.
Thank you all so much for the questions, and thank you, Donatella, again for inviting me. It's really, really nice to be here, and also the questions help me think further and through my own research.
Thank
So
you for being with us. Thanks to everybody who has contributed to make this possible. Maintenance, Media Lab, the students, everybody. And see you November 16 when we have next DDD